today is the impact of COVID-19 to the youth. So we all know that in 2020 the world suffered a pandemic that we were not ready, we were not prepared for, and it caught all of us by surprise. And then we had to adjust our lives. People had to start working indoors. People had to start learning online and all of that. People had to isolate. You have to walk around with your sanitizer. You have to quarantine yourselves. You have to make sure you're taking hot water all the time. And so yeah, people's lives were affected. Okay, we can begin with just some brief information. You can tell us how the situation was for you where you are, so where you were at the time rather, because there's people who are even caught in different countries or are not in their homes, and they had to quarantine or be isolated in different countries. So maybe we can begin with you, Agatha. Tell us, am I pronouncing it correctly?
Okay, that's the right pronunciation. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. I'm Namirembe
Morning.
Agatha Arembe. I'm from Uganda. I'm the chairperson, Uganda Public Employees Union. And I also work for our water body, National Water and Sewage Corporation. And I'm in charge of occupational health and safety. We went through a very bad situation during COVID. The country had to be locked down. In Uganda, we had everyone else being locked down, apart from the essential workers, which were the health workers, those in the water sector where I belong, and also in the people who are providing our electricity. They were the only people who were allowed to operate. So me being one of those in the water sector, we had to really perform our duties. But it was very bad. You would move out, the streets were empty, people were dying. We had to provide water sources to markets and where, it was very, very bad. And along the way, I also became a victim. So I was also affected by COVID, but God's grace, I survived. Many things happened. And the country, I think,
Okay.
has never recovered from that economic shock that happened due to lockdowns. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Agatha. Maybe Asmat, you can tell us how it was for you.
Okay, thank you very much. Hi, everyone. I'm Asnat Mpepo from Tanzania. I'm Secretary of Youth Committee in Trade Union Congress of Tanzania. Talking about the COVID-19 situation in Tanzania, um, we did not have a lockdown as everybody's know, but the citizens were allowed to attend the religious gathering. We had the social distancing rules, while other schools and university in the early days were closed for the few days. Um, but the public was urged to wear the masks and maintain the social distancing. So the activities here in Tanzania continued as usual, but we had to take some measures so as to combat that COVID-19 spread all over the country. And in transportation sectors, we closed the borders and making the mandatory for 14-day quarantine for those who come from the outside the countries. Yeah, that was the situation.
Okay. So we can say that all countries are trying to recover, because if, even here in Kenya, we had a speaker who was coming from Kenya, but she was not able to make it to the meeting today to this workshop today, and so maybe I can just give you a brief of how it was in Kenya. So for us, it was bad because people were forced. In fact, if you were traveling, say you were coming from another country, different country. There was mandatory quarantine by the country. People were just, when you arrive, you're being ferried to a hotel or public institutions that were being used as quarantine centers. And then there was a rule, of course, social distance rule of at least 1 or 1.5 meters away. Any public place, any public facility, you had to wash your hands. People had to walk around with sanitizers. You had to walk around with masks. There was a curfew that was effective if you were out past. Okay, so it kept varying with time. At first, it was at 7 p.m. And then we had an 8 p.m. curfew. And then later on, we had up until 10 p.m. But if you were found around walking around past curfew hours, you are being arrested. If you're found out, having one without a mask, or you dropped your mask below your nose, you had to be arrested. And yeah, all the schools were closed down. And of course, just like Agatha was saying, even here in Kenya, we suffered an economic shock. Yeah. So the next I want us to head is, maybe we can say, how is the situation now as compared to when COVID was intense? Because now we can say the virus has been successfully contained. But so how can you say the situation is in your countries right now as compared to how it was during COVID? Because I know we have not gone back to where we were before COVID, but at least we are not where we were during COVID. So maybe you can tell us how it is now that it's after COVID.
Okay, thank you so much for that.
We can start. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. In Uganda, yes, we are trying to recover, but we have been affected. The inflation rate has gone up so much. What we have noted is so many people lost their employment. That is one thing. Then also some businesses have completely closed down because of that period. People had no income. Others are out of jobs, so their purchasing power has gone down drastically. So you find that some people have closed down. There were people who are servicing loans, and during the lockdown, there was no source of income at all for some people because of the total lockdown. So the loans really quite something that has led people to close down their businesses. They are indebted, and they cannot recover from that period. We are still using sanitizers and masks at some places. People still have that phobia, thinking maybe the next person he meets will still have the COVID virus. They are not very sure. So they are still conscious. If you want to use a sanitizer, you can still use it. If you want to use a mask, you can still use it. But it has changed drastically that most people are not using
Okay, so
SOPs. They are not observing the SOPs as they used to. For me, my request. Sorry, I went off, but I hope I'm on again. Am I on again? Am I audible again? Hello? Hello? Am I back on? Am I back on?
I'm sorry.
Am I back on? I think there's a problem with the network.
Yes, I was wondering whether it is on my side or is it on your side.
Yeah, I see you're also going on and off. I had also
Yes,
gone off, but I'm now back on. I see our colleague has also,
yes,
I think it's network problems, as you know. But all in all, I was
yes.
saying the country is kind of recovering, but other people are still
But
struggling. Mm, thank you. I think the effects of COVID will still takes quite some time, and
okay.
to go fully back to our normal operations, they will take quite
Mm-hmm.
some time. And one thing that we noted also is the people who are affected by COVID are still having problems, health problems. I myself, I get on and off loss of breath and so on. And
Mm-hmm.
also the energy levels are also a bit low due to the effects
Oh.
of COVID. And I've
Mm-hmm.
consulted the doctors and they've said this effect may go, but slowly. I have to take it slowly. I have to look at my feeding. I have to look at the way I have enough rest and do exercise. So we still have that and that, yeah. So it's with us and we have to see how we can manage it. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I understand, and I hope you get better soon because myself, we were also affected with COVID in our family because we had some people who contracted the virus, and we also lost someone to COVID. So I understand. I hope you recover fully soon. I'm seeing Asnat is out of the meeting. I think maybe her connection was also a problem. But
Mm.
yes, what I can say for us in our country in Kenya, it's just the effects are similar to Uganda because we also suffered, quite a very big blow from COVID. Economically, I can say we're still struggling because, like you said, most people lost their jobs. Some of them are very good numbers still trying to get back into employment, and you see employers are not also willing to employ people if they have not also recovered financially, because how will they be able to sustain them? We still have businesses that closed down, people have not been able to open back yet. There's people who are not also they're still, like you said, they're still having effects from the virus, but we are hoping to get better soon. I can say, you see, for example, when you talked about loans here in Kenya, I can say we usually have mobile loaning apps. I believe it's in every country. So most people had to take loans, get loans here and there, and then they were unable to repay. And we find a lot of learning apps had to close down. Some have opened back up, some have not yet, some are not learning anymore because they also need to recover financially. So I can say the situation for us here is just, it's similar. But what I would like to touch on the aspect of education, because for example, in Kenya, and I understand in most countries in the world, schools had to close down, students had to go home. But you find that primary schools and secondary schools, because to sustain them was so hard because of the number of students, you find that they were just closed down for a long period, and they were told when we are able to resume, the parents will be notified and you'll get back to school. But when it comes to institutions like, tertiary institutions, colleges, universities, the students were told, now we're going to have to switch to distance learning. Get yourself a device, get yourself a connection. Or Asnat, we were just proceeding. We're talking about education, but maybe before we touch on that, maybe you can tell us how the situation is right now in Tanzania, as compared to when COVID was a little more intense. Because we had talked about that, when we were just talking about how businesses are still trying to recover, people are still trying to get employment here and there. so many people took loans and they were unable to repay. Maybe you can tell us how it has been in Tanzania, because you are on ground. You see, the rest of us can only read from Google and the internet and just get information from elsewhere. But maybe you can tell us how the situation is right now.
Okay, thank you. In Tanzania, here during the pandemic, we have seen a lot of unemployment has occurred. And most of the young people lose their jobs because of the closure of some businesses and some offices. We can take examples of the tourism sector. There was a traveling ban, so the tourists were not here in Tanzania, and we have a lot of youth that are employed in that sector, like the drivers, the tour guiders. So they lose their employment during that time. But during this time, we have seen different initiatives that have been done by the government of Tanzania to revive that sector. So the situation is now coming back to where it is as compared to during COVID-19 period, and now we have a better condition now. Also, in manufacturing sectors, we have seen the decline of production due to the restriction in some the importation of some raw materials from outside the countries. So those who are working in production sectors, somehow they shake, they run out of incomes, and to their and their families, they experienced the shortage of income. But due to government initiatives, now we have coming back to the situation where now the production is starting to increase as compared to the during pandemic. And also about the social distancing and gathering. During COVID-19 pandemic, there was some restriction on gathering, but nowadays there is no any restriction. People don't wear a mask anymore. We were wearing the mask because we were afraid of contacting with COVID-19, but nowadays people are not wearing masks. They are free to move, and the situation goes as usual. So we thank God the condition here in Tanzania, we don't have any worry about the COVID-19 pandemic, because I know everyone knows that our late President Magufuli has just removed the worry from all the citizens of Tanzania. He was encouraging us just to continue working and not to worry about the COVID-19, and just continue praying to God. He will help us to combat this disease. So in Tanzania, we are free. We continue to work as usual. We don't worry anymore about the COVID-19. Thank you.
I think our moderator is having issues with her net. It is a common problem. Let's just wait on for her to come
Okay.
on.
Yeah, internet is a problem, the connection problem.
Mm, hopefully she'll come on again.
Sure.
But anyway, as we wait for her, because
Mm-hmm.
she has answered about the situation now, I can maybe add on something of what is still the situation. I know COVID-19 had very many negative impacts. We have talked about them, but it also opened up some positives, especially in our country, working from home online.
Okay. I'm sorry, I don't know what happened. And then
Have people working online and working
it
home.
was becoming a problem. Then I got kicked into.
Irene. Yes, Irene, we were waiting for you.
Sorry, can you hear me?
But it's good to see
Yeah,
you.
yeah, yeah.
Yes.
We can hear you.
Yes, we can. We can hear you, Irene.
Thank you.
Can you hear us?
Okay, today the internet is misbehaving. I apologize, but
Okay.
before I was kicked out, ASNA, then we initially the ASNA before you were also kicked out by the internet. We were talking about education, and we wanted to analyze how the situation is. Oh, I am. What is happening to the connection?
Okay, I'm back on. I think there was a problem with my net.
Okay. Today the internet will really inconvenience us. But we were talking about education. I talked about how secondary and primary school kids completely did not have any learning, and then you find for higher education, you find that the students are told, okay, you will have to adapt. First of all, for us in Kenya, there was no learning for a bit, or maybe just about 2 months, and then for the whole, the students were told to start e-learning. But you see, this was also a challenge because some people are not able to, didn't have a computer or didn't have a connection or have electricity problems. People don't all come from the same background. So I'd love to know how the situation was in your countries, because I understand, for example, in Uganda, I know school was just held off for quite a long time, which is same to here in Kenya for over a year. The students are not, pupils are not going to school. So maybe you can update us. Has the learning gone back to fully face-to-face, especially for those, in colleges and higher institution learnings like tertiary institutions, the university? Because for us here, you find that for some institutions, they've gone back to fully face-to-face. For others, they're still using the online learning. So maybe you could update me on how the situation is on your end.
Yeah, thank you so much. In Uganda, as you're aware, the country locked down the education sector. It was the first to be locked down. When we looked at the population of the country, we realized that the biggest group gathering were in schools. And COVID-19, for it to be managed, you had to stop those gatherings. So that's why schools were locked down to avoid those very big gatherings. But it continued on. It continued for almost 2 years. So the effect was that all learners had to miss a whole year. A whole year was missed in their learning curves. So effects have been put in place to make sure that they cover up these gaps. Others were moved to the immediate class that they had to go to, and some remained where they were. A lot of efforts were made to do e-learning, but as you can see, even now we are suffering with the internet connections. So that was not possible. In tertiary institutions, they tried it, but even then, people like the lecturers, the teachers were not familiar with the systems. So these Zooms were quite new to most of the people. Webinars, people didn't know how to do it. There were no already prepared materials to do online trainings. So all those affected the e-learning. There are many things that were tried out in Uganda. They tried out community radios, and you'd see people offering to teach on radio in community radios. That also had its impact, others didn't. But presently, people are all back to school, face-to-face schools, including the tertiary institutions. But some, of course, in tertiary institutions, some people have still, if someone is not available, tried as much as possible to do those e-learning courses. But it's still a long way because the facilities are not there. Not every student can have an internet connection. Not every student has the gadgets to use to facilitate that. So we are completely back to face-to-face. But I believe as you move on, COVID has taught us something. We should be prepared for all eventualities, and we can see that it's possible to do e-learning. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I didn't know that you had something like, like the community radios. I think that's a very good initiative because, radio is a little more easily accessible to everybody as compared to, meetings on Zoom and meetings on Google Meet or things like that. That was a very good initiative by the country. So maybe Asnat, you can tell us how it was in Tanzania.
Well, here in Tanzania also, in the education sector, we have experienced the closing of schools and universities for a short period of time. So during that leave, we had several TV programs that helped the students, especially for the primary students and secondary students. The program were conducted in TVs and radios. But the issues was not all students in Tanzania in their home they have a television, so it's become also a challenge to some of the students. But some of the schools, especially those international schools, or we say the English medium schools, they have the programs during the COVID-19 pandemic, and they give their students the assignments, they communicate with their parents and give them the assignments and exercise examination during that period of school closure. So they continue to participate during their home time. And in the universities levels, some of the university continue to participate in their study by using those e-learning tools, but as we know that the technology of using the e-learning tools is not well here in Tanzania. So it's become also a challenge. Not all students have access to smartphones. The using of those tools is a bit challenge. So it's become a challenge during that time. But during this time, the school has become to its normal activities. There is a face-to-face interaction, and the timetable continues as usual. We don't have any or closure of the school. We have the situation which is well and favorable for face-to-face education.
So thank you. So another aspect that I'd like to look at is health. So we understand that hospitals, of course, were the most affected because this was a health pandemic, and so you find hospitals had to take in, and then it was a crisis. Many people were contracting it, and people had to go get tested. People had to go for medication. Doctors and nurses, healthcare workers had to work almost 24 hours a day. And I can say that we find that most public hospitals were the ones that were expected to treat, to are the ones that are expected generally to handle any health crises. And you find that some were understaffed and some were not equipped. Like we said, it was a first occurrence, and then it affected a very big number of people. So you find that, for example, here, people who are even suffering from other diseases that were not COVID were scared to go to hospital because now they think, the whole place is contaminated, I can fall sick. And we can say that notably, the maternal health care and child health was also suffered a blow because now people are scared to take their small babies to hospital because we were told that the virus could easily be contracted by older people, and then there are a lot of misconceptions here and there. People are saying children, and it is a disease that was killing a big number of people, and so people were scared. I don't know, can you tell us the situation in terms of healthcare was in both Uganda and Tanzania? Because here we can say some hospitals were understaffed, but they had to take in a lot of patients, and then some people were scared to go to hospital, and then there was a lot of skepticism around COVID. So if someone got even just common cold, everyone wanted to isolate themselves because they're like, you have COVID. So maybe you can update us how the situation was in both countries.
Okay, I'll go first. I'll look at our country, Uganda. First and foremost, it's true, as you have said, people avoided hospitals. That is one thing. For the first time, we saw hospital lines not there at all. People avoided and they thought they would get the COVID from there. I remember going to one of the very busy clinic hospitals in Uganda, and it was empty. And I asked myself, are people not falling sick with other diseases or not? But I realized that it was just out of fear. And then I also realized something, that we go to hospitals even when we have very, very simple things that can really be cured. Maybe you have a headache, a backache, things which are not very, very acute. Tend to go to hospitals because it will open up so many things. People will treat themselves from home. So that's something. But unfortunately, the hospitals were to handle the cases of COVID. It was a new thing. No one knew what to do. No one knew what was best. So it was really trial and error. We tried this on someone, became better, and so on.
Okay. How about, what can you say about people and how the vaccine was accepted?
And
Agatha, I'm not sure whether we lost
the
you.
high cases that we had of
but before. Okay. Agatha, at some point we can't hear you. I think your connection is having a problem. But before we have her back, maybe Asnat, you can tell us how it was in Tanzania, how did healthcare struggle, as a whole, because
Okay.
we understand. I understand.
I'm back on.
Oh, you're back on, yes.
Yes, I'm back on. I was saying that our hospitals became overwhelmed. People had to go to intensive care units, but they were very, very few. So they had to run around the clock to make sure that they get more intensive care units, the protectives also, and the capacity of to handle COVID cases was also very, very low. So we lost a lot of lives along the way. And people also feared, as a medical practitioner, you don't know what next. There was also that fear. And others were dying from home and saying it's better to be treated with local herbs than going to hospitals. So that was also another line that they had herbal concoctions that they were using, that they thought they were better than going to hospitals. I know they helped somehow. People came up with all kinds of home treatment. And also at one point, there was issues of running out of oxygen because we are not prepared for that, for such a pandemic. But however, situations were controlled, and we really thanked government and the medical teams, both the nurses and doctors, for their resilience in such a pandemic that were not prepared for. But they were able to save some lives. Thank you.
Agatha, before we proceed to Asna, still when we're looking at health, how can you say, because we understand that eventually vaccines were created, were produced here and there. Sorry, we have had different types of vaccines. So, what was the reception like to the vaccines when in your country? Because here in Kenya, I can tell you that you find that people were so skeptical. People started all forms of misconceptions and rumors. People told each other, "Don't take if you take the vaccine, or you will grow an extra layer, you will die after X amount of time." What was eventually a good number of vaccinated, some are not still not vaccinated till date. But so maybe you can tell us, how was it like in Uganda? Did people receive the vaccine well, or did they have a lot of stories here and there?
The vaccine, when it came, of course, so many people raised a lot of issues. Some people thought it was actually coming to just kill them off as a population. So there was a lot of doubt, So a lot of effects had to come in. People were doubting. They were thinking that they were still giving them the same virus. They were doubtful of the effect. There were stories of people who would die in the next year and so on. So at first, the people who got the vaccines had to be the top. So they started with the members of parliament, the president himself and his family. So there was a lot of sensitization on that. But still, even up to now, there are people who are not vaccinated who still think that the vaccines are something to wipe them away completely. But with sensitization, with the messages and so on, people have now picked and actually have done 3 doses, the first one, the second, and the booster. And when the first team received and they got the second, and we saw that if you got infected with the COVID, when you are vaccinated, the effect would not be so much. At least now people have picked up. So most of the population is vaccinated at the moment, at least 70, I would say about 70, 65 to 70, it's vaccinated. But there are still those ones who think that it was not necessary. So that was the effect. Receiving the news of vaccination, there are those who said, when was this vaccine? The process of coming up with a vaccine should have been a full circle. First tested on animals, then human beings, and then later introduced. So there are also those thoughts. But gladly, people have actually taken up the vaccination to a certain extent.
Okay. Thank you, Agatha. Now, Asmat, maybe you can tell health, the medical sector, how was the situation like? Because I understand that in your country, I think COVID did not as hard as it hit in Kenya, Uganda, and maybe some other countries. So I'd like to know, how was how did the medical section, and also maybe we can say some information when it comes to the vaccine.
Okay, well, in Tanzania here, the situation was somehow. We had experienced the very busy schedule of those health workers. We had special centers that have been isolated for managing the COVID-19, those who are affected by the COVID-19. We have that center. We had that center in each hospital in Tanzania. Each hospital had set aside a special center for accepting those who are affected by the COVID-19, and the health workers were very busy. They work from morning to night to make sure that the health of the affected people recovered. We have seen they emphasize on the traditional methods to combat the COVID-19. The government emphasized the using of traditional method and other medicine to combat the COVID-19, and a lot of people decided to use that traditional medicine, the homemade. There are some of the things that were used. When you mix up, you have a medicine which will help you in combating the effect of COVID-19. And we have seen there was a lack of the ICU facilities because of the congestion of the patients during COVID-19. Some of the health facilities did not have the enough ICU facilities, so we have experienced a shortage of ICU facilities, the shortage of oxygen. We have that challenge, and for in case of vaccine, a lot of people were doubted about that vaccine. Um, the government had to make a very big campaign to educate people about the importance of taking the vaccine because there was the people vaccine, it will affect your reproductive health. You won't get the child anymore. So a lot of youth is refuse to get vaccinated because of those words that were circulating around the countries, and we heard a lot of people said about the effects of the vaccine. We heard about the effects of JJ at the early stages, that it make the blood to freeze, so people died after taking the vaccine. So a lot of people refused to take the vaccine. So the government had to take a lot of efforts and campaign to make sure that people they understand well about the vaccine. And after those campaign and efforts made by the government, we have seen that some people have started taking the vaccine, especially those who are elder. So most of the elder have already took the vaccine, but the problem is still for the youth. They are afraid of taking the vaccine. And up to now, the vaccine campaign continues, and people are going willingly to taking the vaccine, but others still they don't want to take the vaccine because of those beliefs that have been circulating all over the country.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So according to how we had planned the time, I think we're exhausting our 15 minutes. But I'd like to talk about one more thing,
Yeah.
which is the mental health when it comes to COVID-19. COVID-19 affected everybody. People, like we said, people had to lose their jobs. Students had to handle this overwhelming our health sector. People have bills to pay. They have to pay rent. People have to buy, food, but you don't have an income, and the cost of living, like we said earlier, is constantly rising. So we find a lot of youth and a lot of, I mean, the population in general. People ended up having a lot of, anxiety and panic and worry. There's even people who committed suicide. So the mental health was at stake, especially for young people. And I don't know what would be your recommendation right now when it comes to such matters. How they can be handled when it comes to matters mental health. I understand that.
I understand.
So, would you say
What would you say
you are advising?
Would you say you are advising when it comes to the youth or maybe the government
Sorry,
how to handle this?
there is a background noise.
There is a background noise.
Irene, we are not getting you so well. Maybe you repeat what you're saying, the question, because you're on and off.
Yes, I do.
Yes, I do.
Okay, I'm going to repeat. I don't know what the problem is.
I don't know what the problem is. It's playing.
Doing a playback.
Doing a playback. When I speak, it speaks back.
Let's just see whether we can
fix that.
mentally
Because
of the effects from
maybe
Irene, we are not getting you at all. Irene, maybe you type something in the chat. We are not getting you.
Yeah, sure. The internet.
The program.
happen. Okay, thank you.
Asmat, are you getting Irene?
No, I'm not getting her.
No, I think we lost her at one point. Irene, are you back on? We are still not getting you.
She's back, but I think there's a connection problem, maybe.
Yes, we are fixing that, but also there was a playback that was happening. I'm hoping that is also fixed. Something is happening to the website. I apologize, but where I left off is that we were saying about mental health before we conclude. We've talked about education, the healthcare. We've talked about manufacturing industries. We've talked about employment. So I'd like to talk about, because all of these things, because of how they happened and because of COVID, ended up affecting the mental health situation of most people, young and old, and all of that, but most especially young people. And we even had people committing suicide and things like that because they're unable to pay their bills. Bills are knocking on your door, but there is no stream of income coming in. Not just from employment, even businesses, like we said, had to shut down. So what can you say that you advise maybe our government to be doing going forward when it comes to helping people handle mental health?
Yeah, I think what I would advise the government to do is to emphasize the role of counselors. We need counselors in schools, we need counselors in workplaces, especially workplaces. People have ignored the issues of having counselors in workplaces, but it's very, very, very important because people they don't trust anyone. So we need people to be counseled periodically. If you see someone is having an issue, counseling should come in. We should have professional counselors right from the childhood, right from the schools, our institutions, and our workplaces. That would be my advice. So more focus should be put on mental health. Is an area that has been ignored, but we need it to come on board. Thank you. That will be my brief comment on that.
Thank you so much, Agatha. That's actually a very good point right there. Asnat, maybe you can tell us something here.
Okay, thank you. Me also, I can suggest having those psychological counseling expertise to counsel those who have been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, especially on social media platforms, maybe to provide that education to the public through social medias. Also, as Sister Agatha said, even in some of the offices, in the working place, in schools, in universities, those psychological counseling expertise should take place so as to make the mental health return to normal and those affected people return to normal health. Yeah, that's what I have.
Okay. Thank you so much. That's a very important point to say, and especially when you look at the social media angle. So we have come to the end of the meeting. It took slightly longer. We had technical glitches here and there. The internet, let us down a bit here and there. But I'm glad we've been able to have this discussion. So sometimes you find that people are not able to log into social media, maybe because they're at work or in school. But we shall take the video, we shall cut them into smaller parts and share them on social media so that people can keep participating in the conversation. What we'll also encourage you to do is to click on our website, www.speakupafrica.net. The Africa, it's not a C, it's a K. And you find that we have these conversations there. We can read the articles that are posted there and leave a comment, share them with people so that we can have this conversation going. The intention is to always engage our governments and make sure all these ideas that people have and opinions, recommendations can always get to the people at the top. And we are that's the end of the goal. But thank you so much, Asna. Thank you so much, Sister Agatha, as well, for spending your time, sparing your time, and joining the conversation here today. I hope you can always be keeping in touch and you can always be joining our conversations. Thank you so much.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you
Bye.
next time.
Yes, see you next time.